Hello and welcome to the BIZ Sister Show. I am your BIZ sister, Wendy Babcock. And this week I have Miss Michelle joining me. We have a couple other guests that haven't quite joined yet. So whenever they are able to jump in, they will. If not, we're going to have a great conversation. Welcome, Michelle. How are you doing? Oh, go ahead, Michelle. Can you hear me? Did something not go? Oh, can you hear me okay, Michelle? Yep. So go ahead. Welcome. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and what happened? Oh no, I lost her. There she goes. I don't know what happened. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Michelle, and tell us a little bit about you, who you are and what you do.
Sure, thanks a lot. I'm a life and a health coach, and I help women break through the barriers to healthier living, fulfillment, and happiness. I started my career in healthcare quality and patient safety. So for 30 years, I worked as a leader in healthcare. And then after conquering my own health, I was inspired to help other women. And so I followed that path to do the jump. And
Awesome.
so, yes. And so now, I run my own business, but one of my passions is speaking. And part of that journey was I started out more as an informational speaker and then went on to motivational. And then after my trauma, I really wanted to do more storytelling.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
always interesting the when people schedule to come on the show, they're always like I said, there's always a theme. And I just connected between you and Jessie, who's just joined us. She works
Mhm.
with mental health. And so,
Yeah.
when she speaks on that, so I think this is going to be an interesting conversation all the way around. So, I'm going to go ahead and have Jessie introduce herself and a little bit about what you do.
Hi, I'm Jessie Rowe, and I apologize for my tardiness, a little technical difficulty. Um, I work in community-based services, so I oversee individuals who have been put in the system whose children are going through visitations. I do drug and alcohol counseling and therapy. I also do family support work with people who are in the system and need the resources to help reunify their families. I'm going back to school because I'm glutton for punishment for mental health therapy. And like you, Michelle, I used to be a speaker and then I had my own trauma and I got more into storytelling as well because
Yeah.
I feel like, in at least what I do, people are more likely to work with you and to be successful in themselves when they know they can relate to that person and that their therapist and that individual can say, I've been there.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. And just to let you know, my first passion is I was a very sick woman. I actually was diagnosed with heart attack and stroke waiting to happen. And it was after I conquered my health that I really wanted to help people in that arena, which was, I had lost 115 pounds and reversed my insulin resistance and
Wow.
conquered
Oh my gosh.
diabetes and high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I got off all my meds. I'm not a diabetic anymore. And working in the healthcare system, nobody ever told me it was possible to reverse your insulin resistance. So that was kind of my focus. And then when I really started coaching a lot of people who were coming to me about weight loss, what I was finding is there was some deep rooted trauma in their life. And it could be in any way. It could be divorce, it could be, an attack, whatever it was. And that is what made me realize that even in my, not just in helping, but in speaking to like you said, to establish that not only our vulnerability, but that connection between we understand.
Right. I love it. I love that storytelling is going to be the theme, I think, tonight with the speaking industry. And I think it's so important because teaching something is great, just giving all the facts and all that, but people remember it when there's a story attached to it. I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many speakers I've seen where they've given great information, but like I'll forget it. But when they've attached a personal story to it, that's what reminds me of what it was they spoke on. So, if you want to talk a little bit about that, about how you came to build your story.
Sure. I decided to work with Lisa Nichols. And for anyone that doesn't know Lisa Nichols is the top motivational speaker across the world, actually. And she's helped over 80 million people. She contributed to The Secret, to Chicken Soup for the African American Soul. And I decided that she was a great storyteller because of her own, traumas.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a wonderful experience that I had with her. And she taught us a couple of really great tips. One was that if, there's different types of speakers. You can be an informational speaker, inspirational, motivational, and transformational. And there's very few people in the world that are transformational speakers. And that's what I wanted to be. Because you have to take people into your dark. You literally have to know how to push their buttons,
Right.
get them into the dark with you. And at the same time, you're all those other types of speakers. You have to be motivational, inspirational, and then you have to sort of take them out of that darkness with all of the lessons that you have learned. So we were given different techniques. So it depends on what kind of speaking I'm doing. So if I'm going in there to share my story of how I almost died, then I will take them into what we call the dip theory or the valley.
Right.
And I will start by telling them all the wonderful things about me, like what most people know is whatever. And then I go on and I tell them my credentials and, that I'm a registered influencer with the American Diabetes Association. And they don't know anything other than that. And then I'll say, but there was a time in my life when I was shattered and now I'm whole.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of integrate. She taught us to integrate our story with content, and it goes content, story, content, story, content, story. And so I would do that, and I would be giving them some facts in between and what I learned in, even being a leader in the healthcare system and not knowing that, I think I mentioned that only 5% of medical schools require doctors to take one course in nutrition. Unless they go back to school to become a functional medicine doctor, they have no idea what to tell you when you're sick.
Right.
And so I will take them into the darkness. But one of the things she also talked to us about was she wants you to show your emotions and to use the senses, right? So that you're really, showing, not telling when you're doing your speaking. But she said that if you go into that state where you're actually crying, where, you're showing them, but you can't get out of it, then you're not healed and you're not ready to do that in speaking.
Wow. Wow.
Right? You have to be able to take them to that depth with all your pain and to actually bring it up and feel it and then show them that it doesn't stick with you anymore. And I think that's powerful because when I got out of my trauma, I actually had a family member that said to me, well, if you're healed from it, why do you keep talking about it? And I said, and I told them what I just shared. And I said, because I'm healed and now it's my calling.
Yeah. I honestly have struggled with that too, because telling my story affects a lot of different people. And not everybody wants to hear the story because it affects a lot of different people, but it's like, it is still my story. It's what I have experienced and what I've gone through. And while it's not my platform for speaking, I have had a platform where I have shared my story. And it's incredibly difficult. And I know exactly what you mean. I've told the story before. The first time I told it, I cried and couldn't get out of it. And I knew it wasn't the time to share it because I obviously was not ready. Although I was in a group of, it was a polka dot powerhouse meeting and it was all women and I felt very comfortable. And I think that also, it was a level of comfort that I felt to show all that emotion. So I didn't tell that story for a long time until I had my own event and then I shared it. And I was able to do exactly what you said. I felt it. I just let it come on as it did. Of course, I cried, but then I was able to get out of it and show them the strength that I have built since then.
Mhm.
So I think that makes a difference. And so, Jesse, like from your point of view, then also you work in the healthcare industry. So, what's your take on this with telling story and being on stage with trauma and everything you've experienced?
I would totally agree because my experience and my trauma, my traumas, I should say, but the major place where my story goes is dark. It is deep. And I can go there without emotion. And I think that I'm not without emotion, but with the ability to not cry anymore. It's not that I don't feel it. It's not that I don't take people there, but I've
Right.
overcome. So I don't go to that really scary hole. I too agree, which is so funny. When I first came out with my story, not only did I get accused of not being over it, but telling the dirty, dark family secret. Um, and it was like, well, one, this is my story, not yours. And two, that's part of the problem I've noticed, at least in my industry. And, if anything comes good out of COVID-19, it's the fact that everybody now has some form of mental health that they want to talk about.
Right.
But it's important that these stories get told with an emotion and with an emotional aspect because there are so many people going through it now, and
Yeah.
we need those advocates, those people that are willing to say, you know what, I have no problem letting you inside my world for a bit. Not
Yeah.
everybody can do that. It's okay if you're not one of those people that can do that.
Right. I think
Well,
that's huge.
yeah.
And I think sometimes we need people that we can identify with. Just recently happened, there was, someone who's in a networking group that I'm in shared something very vulnerable. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I went through something very similar and I was able to share that. And, I think we need to share on a vulnerable level because that just was like, oh my gosh, okay, thank God somebody else gets it. Like, it's not just me.
Absolutely. And I think more and more, definitely in these networking groups like Polka Dot Powerhouse and
Hmm.
things like that, is people are starting to become more vulnerable and share their
Yeah.
story. Now we just have to get it outside those walls
Yeah.
and to the general public because a lot of people aren't in networking groups and they're missing on the messages that we need to be sharing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit about so what stages usually are the best for you to get on then? Like who's your audience usually that you're speaking to?
My signature speech really is about the connection between the mind, body, and spirit. For me, that covers health because it's our every decision that we make is made with our brain.
Hmm.
And Jesse knows this, right? And so I actually, when I went through my trauma, I ended up in the hospital twice. I actually broke a toe that is not even bendable anymore. I ended up with metal in my chest. I was in the flight and fight. I
Wow.
was fighting, and it was serious with me, and it was like, so I learned a lot. Like, I'm deep into, I didn't take a specific mental health class, but I did go back to school for spiritual psychology, and then I went in for coaching based on NIP principles. And
Hmm.
I have worked with, you know almost hundreds of people now who have gone through these things. And I've realized that once we start to get people to understand the connection between everything, their DNA, that their thoughts affect their DNA and their health. So to me, it's mental health and health altogether.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. So I try to get on stages really where people are struggling with either mental health or health. It doesn't really matter, but most people will not reveal to you that they're struggling with mental health,
Yeah.
right? And an example of that is when I got into the neurotransformational coaching program, there were people there from all over the world, and some of them were former athletes, some of them were former, like, they were an Olympian, and how their life changed after they were no longer in those positions, and how awful they felt about themselves and switching careers and all of that. And it made me realize what Jesse was saying. They became so relatable to me, and I realized that my story was nothing compared to other people, and it was heinous. And I realized how many people, I mean, now I know almost every person in this world is traumatized, but
Right.
they don't express their emotions. So I like to get on stages primarily with women, women groups, things like that. I
Hmm.
have, done some speaking at children's hospitals, but to the leaders, not to the
Right.
not to the children.
Right.
But yeah, I've done some dot speaking as well, and I've also done speeches at, across the country on stages, in
Right.
different areas. So goal right now, um, my primary goal is to get people to really work on switching, helping them understand their brain so that they can heal
Right.
emotionally, physically, everywhere.
And I don't know if the both of you have had this experience, but I had an event where I had, and I'm a complaint-free trainer, right? So I recognize when I see a lot of complaining, I can usually kind of pinpoint what's going on. But I had this lady who had bought a ticket, and she just was like in my inbox the whole time, complaining about this or that before the event even started. And I kept thinking to myself, gosh, this lady's kind of a pain in my butt. Like, what is going on with her, you know? I mean, I'm just being honest. And so I get to the event, and it was a 3-day event. And again, that person's microphone's not loud enough. She's just always in my ear. And I'm like, why is she here? Like, she just, I'm like, I kept reminding myself, she bought a ticket. She was here by herself. There's a reason why she's here. And I couldn't pinpoint it. And interestingly, when I shared my story on Saturday, I got up on stage and I talked about my trauma and how I overcame and all that stuff. And it was related to domestic abuse. And she came up to me at the end and she's like, "You're who I needed to hear." And she was like in tears. I'm like, I mean, there was like 8 speakers and I wanted her to just connect with somebody that was there. But it just goes to show that I had no idea. And so her trauma was driving like all the complaining, and she just was unhappy with her life situation. It was kind of taking it out on me at the time, but I just was like, wow, this is why I need to share my story, because I didn't know that I was going to be the one that she needed to hear. I had no idea. But she was in a similar situation that she wanted to get out of. And it was just like this aha moment for me as a speaker, because I had never shared my story like that in depth as I did that day. And I'm telling you, it
You
just,
were, yeah, you were triggering her.
yeah, very much
Yeah.
so. Very much so.
Yeah.
And so it's just how it came kind of full circle when I got off the stage and she walked up and it's like, that's what I needed to hear. And I was just like, I was so blown away by it, and I
Yeah.
wonder if reverse too, was she triggering me because of the complaining, because of what
Right.
she was
Yeah.
going through? And it's kind of like a reverse thing. You're like, okay, why is this bothering me so much that she's complaining? What was it about that? So maybe I was just feeling her trauma. I don't know. I can't explain it, but it just was an incredible thing that has stuck with me since. And it's been quite a few years now. But so what about you, Jesse? Like when you're up on stages and stuff, like who's your audience, and what has your experience been?
Well, it's interesting because when I started speaking when I was younger, it was all about marketing. And my marketing audience was anybody that wanted high energy. So if you wanted high energy and a lot of fun, I was your girl. And so I would say a younger crowd or a dynamic crowd. But now with what I speak, I mean, even when I'm doing one-on-one sessions, I feel
Mhm.
like that's a stage at times. And I would say that I'm for the people who have lost hope in their career, to be
Mm.
honest with you. Because for those of you that know me, I changed careers. I mean, in the last 2 years, and coming up on 3, because of the trauma that I went through. And then on top of that, I would also say people that are looking to enhance their life. So,
Mm.
for instance, the fact that I'm a recovering alcoholic, there are some people that come to the realization one day, I may have something going on here, and they just need to hear somebody else that's done it, and that
Yeah.
that you're still fun and you're still cool, and you know, it doesn't mean you're giving your life away, but I would say it's the people that are considering change in their life would come see me. And I love what Michelle said, which is so true, because I've always said good physical health means good mental health and vice versa. You can't have one without the other. And so I just think somebody that's looking for like almost an olive branch, like for me, a speaker actually has to kind of make me mad to get me to do something. George Bryant's a classic example. He makes me angry sometimes.
He pushes the buttons. Yeah.
Works every time. And, you know, like when I was quitting drinking or quitting smoking or quitting something, it was always because someone made me mad, you guys. Like they said something that just set me off. So
I got to ask you real quick. So
yeah,
why did it set you off? Was it because you heard truth in it and you didn't want to hear that? Or what was it that set you off?
I would say, like, in one circumstance, it was because I heard truth in it. Okay. In another circumstance, when it came to alcoholism, it was somebody had said something to me, a very close individual that should not say something like this, about my child with special needs.
Oh.
And so, okay, we were all, I'm not going to lie, we were all drunk at the time. And I literally thought to myself, I've always said a drunk word is a sober thought. And so the Jessie at the time, who was intoxicated, literally went outside, cried a few tears like that girl in the bar, and then walked back inside and was like, let's go get pizza. Whereas sober Jessie would have been like, that was unacceptable. You will never say that again. And I'm leaving, and left.
Wow.
And so it took that person making me angry in a very real situation to go, this is not suiting me.
Right.
Because I need to be this person for my child. And I wasn't in that moment. So it kind of takes someone really like stomping on my pride a little bit. And that's not a method that I use. Like, I would not be good at it because it's not the type of person I am. But for me, I'm like that person that if you need a hug, you're going to come see me type of thing. Right. You need a hug, you need a gentle push. But if you're like me and need your pride stomped on, you're not going to come to me because I can't do it. It's not in my personality.
Right. Yeah. I felt, and I feel like I felt some of that. So when I went to the Idea Collective retreat and I got to ask Mel Robbins a question, and I was telling her about, like, I have all these rabid squirrels, like, running around my brain with all these crazy ideas, and, like, I don't know what to do. How do I reel them in? And without skipping a beat, she goes, you got to kill the squirrels. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I didn't say this to her, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to kill the squirrels. Mm-hmm. Like, I want to hurt the squirrel. Right. Yeah. So it was like, and then she followed it up by something that really stuck with me, because I didn't tell her anything personal. I told her I did like a networking community and that, that kind of stuff. But I have all these crazy ideas. And she says, usually people like me, with her as well, she was saying herself, who have all these crazy ideas usually stem from childhood trauma. And as soon as she said that, like, the waterworks hit me, because it was something like I didn't necessarily want to hear it in that moment, but I needed to hear it because I knew it. I knew that there was something affecting, like she talked about, like my nervous system and how we're always on high alert. So we feel like we have to do all the things and all of this, and it, and I was on stage and everyone's looking at me and I'm just like crying. I'm trying to stop. I couldn't stop crying for 20 minutes after I got off the stage because what she said was so profound and so real. But like you said, I'm not that person. Like I couldn't be that real and raw with somebody who needs to hear, because I'm like, Jessie, that's not who I am. Mm-hmm. I'm more of the, well, let's talk through this. So.
What's so interesting about her telling you that? So there's what's called ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because that is so me. And I have ACEs. And what's interesting is thinking about, the people that I wanted to touch are the people that are looking to overcome those traumas through positive experiences.
Yeah.
And because, believe it or not, in everyday working environment in my world, I see people who are either choosing to let those traumas affect them in a negative way so that they can get services or they can be a victim for the rest of their life. But majority of the people I encountered are saying, I'm here because I want to learn how to overcome this and be on top.
Right.
And I just think that's cool. So honestly, if your only problem is you got crazy squirrels like I do all the time, I think we're doing pretty good.
Right. I think so. And then we need someone like Michelle to come in and like reel it all
Yes,
together with like all the health and stuff, and like we're gonna be in good shape.
I know.
Right.
Storytelling is so impactful because you really are connecting with people and being relatable. And for me, I grew up as a child where I was the oldest of five, and had to be perfect. I was the role
Yep.
model for all my siblings. And so when trauma hit me, it was at first it was really funny to share my story,
Right.
to actually put it out there. And now I feel like I'm a whole different person because I've posted things online that said I've been shamed, physically attacked, emotionally abused, terrorized, and cheated on.
Yeah.
you know
Wow.
you know
Yeah.
Right.
um but the moral of that story is always, but I've overcome it all.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you don't have triggers once in a while, but
Yeah.
right, you really do. But that's why, even though I'm a coach, I believe reaching more people, trying to connect to them through speaking, you have another avenue, if you will, to do that.
Well, and I think that's so important, real quick before Jesse adds in. But with speaking, what I think it's interesting is because sometimes the people who need it most won't come to you for one-on-one.
Right.
They'll
Right.
come to an event not knowing, just like that lady. She didn't know that I was the person she needed to hear from. So people might be in a room not knowing they need to hear your story, then they hear it, and now they have like that olive branch, like Jesse was saying. They have that olive branch, like, oh my gosh, this person gets it. Oh my gosh, I feel like I can maybe make that next step now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was glad that you brought that up, because I just wanted to share one of the things that Lisa Nichols taught us was that, always looking into that audience and imagining yourself that there's a student out there, and that if you really talk to them to their heart and their mind at the end of the speech, like that powerful impact speech, that you can really use your words to connect with them at the heart, so that they say, wow, maybe this could be my teacher.
Right. Right.
Wrap
And
that.
I think I've become I think I've become a better storyteller, a better speaker because of Alcoholics Anonymous, guys. I know that sounds nuts, but it's because people will call on you to share. You're not, one, you have no idea what that topic's going to be in that moment.
Wow.
And two, you got to share from your heart in 3 to 5 minutes.
Wow.
Based on whatever topic it is. And it's terrifying. But at the same time, it's a judgment-free zone.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times somebody's been called out and they're like, oh gosh, but it's exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. And what I love about speaking these days too is it doesn't mean you have to be on a stage. You can be on a podcast. You can be anywhere nowadays. It's so cool.
It really is.
I mean, look at us.
Yeah, just having a conversation. And I think just as we're talking right now, someone's going to hear this that needed to hear a part of this at least. That's going to say, and we're all just sharing our stories and talking about our experiences. And that's why I created this show, because I think it's so important to share our experiences to help people, and even though we're talking more about like our mental health and our traumas and stuff, but being on stage and sharing that. So for someone who has thought about going on stage, I would really challenge them to think about, by not taking the stage, somebody is missing your story.
Yes. It's like Susie Simonson always says.
Yeah.
You know, how does she put it? It's something
about
of,
you are exactly who your world needs.
yes, that's it. And that's
Yeah.
so true when you're speaking. So
Yes.
I'm like you. I would challenge somebody to go, who does my world need me to be? And
Right.
and what do I have to bring to the table? Because at the end of the day, we all, whether you're introverted, extroverted, we all have something our world needs.
Yeah.
How are you going to bring it forward today?
Yeah.
And just, I like that you mentioned about not having to be on a stage like with social media, because I've used another tip that Lisa Nichols left me with that was about connecting with your audience right up front so that you pull them in before you may even share your story. And I use a lot of that when I do YouTube videos, right? Because it's shorter and it's called Me, We, You. So it's first you're telling them something about yourself, and then you spread it open. So the first one, like, there was a time in my life, and then you tell them about you. And then you would say something like, we have, we have a tendency to. So now you're talking to the we, the bigger group. And at the end, it's like, has there ever been a time in your life that you've whatever? So
Yeah.
you can get this really short thing out there where you've just made this connection really quick.
I love
And it is,
I do too.
yeah. You,
me,
we,
we,
you.
Me, we, you.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a great tip. I don't know that I've seen stuff from her before. I'm definitely going to be looking her up.
Yeah, she has a show on YouTube and she gives all of these tips. She shares a lot of them on there. Working her with her was really awesome. She really does. She has a lot of great tips. But when I graduated that program, we all had to stand in front of somebody and present. We were actually supposed to go to California, but because of the pandemic, it was online. Boo, right? I was supposed to
Right?
be in California. It was online. One of the things that they also do is they make it fun. And I know I'm mentioning this to you, Wendy, because you're fun, you like the fun. And they really talk about using iterations, not just cadence, but it'd be like, I've turned as a result of working with me, my clients have turned frustration into motivation and unhealthy habits, and it's almost like a dance.
Yeah.
And so she too. Yeah.
I agree.
Well,
Yeah. Go ahead, Jess.
and as silly as it sounds, and being a theater nerd like I am, I get really excited. So for all of you theater nerds out there that didn't make it to Broadway like me, this is your theater. This is your stage.
Yeah.
Have fun with it. Be silly. Have a ritual before that makes you, a certain song or something that pumps you up. Because honestly, even though you're telling your story, it's still a performance.
Yeah.
It's still your podium. It's still your platform, and you can make whatever you want to make out of it. It doesn't have to be the sad story. It could be a story that's very heartfelt, but it's about empowerment. I mean,
Yeah.
it's what you want to project. You don't have to hit all the feels, so to speak.
Yeah. And especially if you're not ready. Because I found that out, like I said, the first time I shared my story, and I just was like in tears the whole I'm like, okay, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah.
And knowing when
Yeah.
you're ready to share that, and then, go up a few levels. If you're not ready to go to that deep, deep dive, share different things. We all have these big life experiences. There's always something that we can share to tie to whatever lessons it is we're trying, like you said, lesson, story, and tie those things together when you're speaking.
Right.
Well, and especially with the me, we, you, you can
Yes.
even design that around. Gosh, I want to use that
I
to
do
break
too. I love
down.
that.
I love that.
That was a great tip. Whoever's watching, write that down. That was an incredible tip. Thank you,
I
Michelle.
did.
Yes.
It's my favorite. It really is my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's great. No,
Because
I love it.
like I said, you can use it at the beginning of a speech just to get people engaged and then go on and tell the rest of your story. And sometimes it's the whole story. It really
Right.
is where you're speaking and what you're speaking about.
And
Yeah.
when I was learning to speak from Will Bowen and stuff, he told me, a lot of people want to insert humor. He's like, but don't do it unless you're good at it. Because I was thinking about what you were talking about, the me, we, you. I like to start out my presentations with a story. And because I do like to be funny and humorous, I always start out with some kind of a fun quip. either there's a story he tells about these construction guys having lunch, which is funny, or I tell my story about going through what's it called, the warrior dash, where I did this 5K with all these crazy obstacles, and I tell but I work the story around the lessons I'm going to teach. There's something in that story that connects to, so that I kind of draw them in that way with the story, so that they're picturing in their minds either the construction guys talking about their lunches or eating their lunches, whatever, or they're picturing me, doing this, climbing this crazy contraption and complaining about it or whatever it is. So I try and pull them in that way too with that story. So I think those are
Right.
great ways to start it out.
I wish I had your innate ability to be funny and quick-witted, like right off the bat. I don't have it. I would
And
love
see,
that.
the funny
Well,
thing
we're all
is mine is, I think, is actually like a coping mechanism. Mine developed because it was coping, because I was brought up in a very
mm,
sarcastic house where my stepdad had always had a comment, something sarcastic, and you learn that, so you learn to kind of laugh things off and do jokes and, be sarcastic. And
I know. I got
well,
to introduce you to my sister. If I could take you guys' humor and wrap it into a bow, I would be on the circuit. You would never see
well,
me again. I'd be everywhere.
I'm something that's very unusual, but you need to know that one of my passions is not, it's writing. I've wrote poetry since I was a young girl. I went into contests. I'm an author. And so at one point in my life, I started with my YouTube. I was actually doing my like sharing in poetry. And I had
oh,
some people
wow.
listen to it, like, oh my gosh. And because in the speaking class, I also had Sean Smith come in, who is, he was named the #1 international national speaker in years ago, but he's also a coach. He was the one that teach the neurotransformational coaching class, and came into our class to teach us how to talk without talking, how to speak without talking, and it was all about our body and
Oh,
how
wow.
if we don't watch, he said, so you're standing in front of a stage and you're telling people, how much you really are good with people and you're walking backwards. He said, you have to really watch. He said, and it's not like people are taught this way of, making sure you make eye movement at everybody. And people are so conditioned to how they're supposed to appear on the stage and how they're supposed to walk. And he said, sometimes just being you and being more attention of that storytelling with your body,
Yeah.
like actually it's part of the storytelling. It's not just showing them with emotion, but it's showing them with your body. And I have laughed my head off when I have done some of these YouTube videos that I start them over again. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I say, I cannot believe how my body was not saying what was in my heart.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's really important to take a look at that if you're not used to that. But I did. I like doing the poetry with the rhyming. It catches people's attention.
And that's probably why I caught your attention with the alliteration thing, because I also wrote poetry and lyrics for songs for years. And so
Oh wow.
there has to be a cadence sometimes. So some things, even though like, there's like 3 S's in a sentence, it may not like flow like I like. So it'll take me a while to make it work. But I'm like you, it's like that. That's why that makes total sense why you're drawn to that alliteration part, because that poetry background is just like in the back of your head screaming like, no, that doesn't work.
I love that
Yeah.
because all of my recent speaking has been done through a blog that I did that I
Oh,
turned into
wow.
a book.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, and I just took it's almost like a journal entry, but I took all these posts and then I realized the worst task was not writing the post, it was rearranging it so it flowed for the book. But
Right.
it's actually, when I sat down and read it, I was like, this is a talk right here. And
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just nuts and there's something, it's almost musical, that
Yeah.
rhythm to it and that flow. And I love how you bring up nonverbal cues and nonverbal communication, because it's just like when they tell you when you're sitting in a meeting, don't cross your arms.
Right.
Doesn't mean you're
You're
not
closed
open.
off. You need to have it open.
Yeah. So that makes perfect sense walking towards the audience. I didn't think about that.
And Will Bowen taught me that. So if you ever watch one of Will Bowen's videos on YouTube, you'll notice he almost always stands almost on the edge of the stage. And
Wow.
I've started doing that because the audience feels more engaged with you. You're standing right there. You're kind of like filling them up, so to speak, from that. And when you're backing
Yeah.
up, it's like a confidence thing, I think. But so
You
now
know,
I'm always at the front of the stage. I try and get as close to the front of that stage as I can so that people know I'm engaging with them.
you guys are gonna have to
Great.
put like a glow in the dark tape for me because my clumsy
Bulbs.
hand would fall right off.
Right. But yeah, no, the body language is huge. And also like the other thing is like, what do you do with your arms? That's part
It's
of it
like,
too.
oh,
And
girl,
Will
like
said,
do.
I was always taught like elbows in and like you have this much room, but I like to be more
Mhm.
me. So mine do come up when I'm talking sometimes, but also don't put your hands down in front of like cross your arms in front of your groin because that draws attention there. I'm like,
Oh,
see a video of someone
oh
doing
my
that. Where do you look? You look right there.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny that you said that because when I was practicing with the people that made us like have the screen behind us and we were practicing or speaking, there was one guy that was practicing and he said, I'm never wearing this long tie again because of where it looked at
It's
on
like,
his body.
yeah.
And then so yeah, it really is important to look at what you're wearing.
Mhm.
For me, I
Yeah.
was so it was my infancy in speaking, and I remember when I watched the video of me, I kept looking back at the screen like this. I think my head was nodding. It's a wonder my head didn't fall off.
Yes, when you practice, you have to record yourself at home so you can see what your body language is.
Yeah.
I've seen people like on stage that they're always like doing like the praying hands thing, like, just it's like, and
Yes.
all I can focus on is on their hands because they keep doing that. It's like, do something else. I
Mhm.
just want you to put
Yeah.
your arms down. Like I can't focus on what you're saying because your hands are like right here. So,
Yes.
you know, so you have to watch yourself talking to know like
Yeah.
what other people are seeing. And that's hard. Like I recorded myself in my office by myself. I'm like, this is really weird. Like I didn't want to watch this back.
Have you guys ever
I've
warmed up your room before?
Have what?
Warmed up your room before?
Mm-mm. What is it?
So somebody taught me a long, long time ago, and I can't remember who it was. And now it is my ritual when I speak in person.
Mhm.
Before everybody gets there and before you take the stage, walk the entire room
Yes.
and
Mm.
feel your energy. I
Yeah.
will tell you, there is something to that. And I've even sat in a couple of chairs to see different perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
really, really helpful because it was Tony Blake. She calls it warming up the room. And it works for me for some reason.
You're right. I didn't know that there was a name for it, but Will taught me that too. Like always get there early, walk around. He'll try and touch almost every chair
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
because it is something about the energy and like owning that space. So when you take the stage, there is something, I don't know if it's energy wise or emotional, mental thing, but yeah, it makes a huge difference as opposed to walking into a place cold. And now you're getting on stage. I always am more nervous when I do that.
Me too.
I was taught the same thing that sometimes even if you were there that early, you could even greet a couple people. Other people have said, no, wait till, don't, be the person that comes out on the stage. But I've heard that they're almost most likely to come up and talk to you later or work with you or
Yeah.
whatever, just in that little bit of time of you walking through.
Yeah.
So
And
I know that
I love that you said
again,
that, Michelle, because okay, I know there are two schools of thought here, but for me, because of the person I am, I like to meet people before. One, because it
yeah,
warms up the room, but two, I'm too afraid. I don't want to be that person that thinks comes off like they think they're so big that I
right.
don't talk to people till after. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I talk to you the entire time.
You
And
want to be
it's
approachable.
exactly. And I've always felt like speakers that don't do that it's not their intention, but they just don't seem as approachable to me. So I'm a
Right.
little more hesitant to go up to them afterwards.
Right. And there is an amount of authority, I guess, when you take a stage, even if you've been kind of talking with people during an event and you take the stage, when you come off, there's a definite shift. You know, you've now
Yeah.
become this kind of this authority figure, and I never really understood that, but in watching other speakers, I do the same thing with them. Like, I've been talking to you all weekend, and you know, this is great. You take the stage, and now it's like, oh, you're more of an authority figure now. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of a strange thing, but it
It's a rock
happens.
star thing. I always say it's your rock star moment is the afterward, because
Right,
all of a sudden people are like, whoa, they're here with a purpose. And it's
right.
awesome.
Yeah,
But
it's very cool.
handle it just all depends on how you handle it. And I just really encourage people to never get so big. I go back to a time when I went to a conference, and John, I'm going to slaughter his last name, Keontas, the guy who does all the crime, does the 2020 crime shows. He's
Okay.
amazing. He was the huge speaker, and I found the courage to go up to him and get a picture with him. But he actually talked to me, which was what was incredible about stuff. If Mr. 2020 can talk to little Jesse from Nebraska about real issues,
Yeah,
we all can, you know?
yeah, I agree. Well, we just hit 6 o'clock, so I really want to make sure you ladies share your information that you would like to share with the audience. If your website, your contact information, if you have like something a special that you have going on, anything you want to share, go ahead. I'll start with you, Michelle.
Thank you. So my website is makehealthyfit.coach. And once you get there, you can get to all of my social media channels. So that's an easy way to do that. Right now, I don't have a specific group coaching or anything like that going on, but I do have a book. And so if there's anybody out there who is interested in healthier living, I have a book called Journey Beyond the Plate on Amazon. And so I just ask you to check it out.
Journey Beyond the Plate.
Journey Beyond the Plate.
Okay, I'm just putting that in the comments here. So, all right,
Yeah.
there we go. So, Miss Jessie, would you like to share your information?
You can find me at www.renewedvisioncddc.org. I know that's a mouthful.
All right,
CDDC.
all right, Renewed Vision, CDDC.org.
And
Okay.
then I have 2 books out. One is Sober with a Big S, Beyond the 12 Steps, and the other one is I Am Not My Disorder.
Oh.
And you can find those on Amazon.
Try to type here quick. Okay. Those are great. Sorry, I didn't do capitalization in the comments, but yeah. So they can definitely look you up. And please connect with Jessie and Michelle. Thank you both so much for being on the Biz Sister Show. I appreciate both of you to take the time out of your day to share so much wisdom. Oh my gosh, I just feel like this is a huge episode for people to really watch. Lots of great tips and advice were given and insights. So thank you both so much.
Thanks,
No,
guys.
thank you.
Awesome. So for everybody else, we will see you next week at 5:15 for the Biz Sister Show. Have a great night and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.